The Galactic Concord had been watching Earth for 300 years. Ambassador Veth Karan of the Silithian Collective pressed his elongated fingers against the observation console, his translucent skin flickering with shades of concerned purple as he reviewed the latest surveillance data from the Sol system. Around him, the monitoring station hummed with the quiet efficiency of technology perfected over millennia. "They've done it again," he murmured, more to himself than to his colleagues. Senior observer Thrixel, a member of the insectoid Kethmori species, clicked her mandibles in what passed for amusement among her kind. What have the primitives accomplished this time? Another crude combustion vehicle? Perhaps they've finally stopped fighting among themselves for longer than a rotation? They've developed fusion containment. The chamber fell silent. The 17 observers present, representatives from 12 different species, turned their attention toward Veth Karan with expressions ranging from disbelief to outright denial. "Impossible," declared High Monitor Orenthal, his massive Rexian frame shifting in his specialized seating apparatus. "Our projections indicated they were at least 40 cycles from even theoretical understanding of stable fusion matrices. They were still burning hydrocarbons for energy when we last conducted a formal assessment." "That assessment was conducted 12 cycles ago," Veth Karan replied, his skin shifting to a deep blue of concern. "In that time, they have not only achieved fusion containment, but have begun constructing orbital manufacturing platforms, established permanent settlements on their fourth planet, and—" He paused, checking the data twice to ensure accuracy. "They appear to have developed artificial intelligence systems that rival our own Tier 3 cognitive engines."
Thrixal's compound eyes focused on the holographic display that Veth Karan projected into the center of the chamber. The images showed gleaming structures rising from the rusty surface of the planet the humans called Mars, massive orbital rings taking shape around their homeworld, and sleek vessels traversing their solar system with an efficiency that seemed incompatible with their supposed technological level.
"This cannot be accurate," Thrixel insisted. "The humans were classified as a pre-contact civilization just 50 cycles ago. Species do not advance this rapidly. It defies the progression protocols that have governed galactic development for 100,000 years." "And yet," Veth Karan said quietly, "here we are."
High Monitor Orenthal rose from his seat, his 7-meter frame casting shadows across the chamber. The Vrexians were the oldest species currently active in the Galactic Concord, having achieved faster-than-light travel when most current member species were still struggling with basic tool use. They had seen civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, and their perspective was valued precisely because of their long memory.
"Show me their military capabilities," Orenthal commanded. Veth Karan hesitated. "High Monitor, I'm not certain that's relevant to—" "Show me." The holographic display shifted, and the chamber fell even more silent than before. The images showed Earth's orbital defense grid, a network of platforms and stations that shouldn't have existed according to any reasonable projection of human development. Weapon systems that incorporated principles the humans shouldn't have understood. Shield generators that hummed with energies that several observers recognized with growing unease. "They've reverse-engineered collective technology," Thrixel breathed. "How? We've never made contact. We've never left artifacts in their system. How could they possibly—" "The Dreketh probe," Orenthal interrupted, his voice heavy with sudden understanding. 73 cycles ago, the Dreketh lost an automated survey vessel in the Sol system's outer reaches. It was considered destroyed by the gravitational anomalies near their 8th planet. The logs indicated complete fragmentation. Veth Karan pulled up the relevant historical data. The humans recovered it. They must have. And if they recovered it intact enough to study, then they've had 7 decades to analyze technology from a species that achieved faster-than-light capability 4,000 years ago, Orenthal finished. 7 decades of human adaptation and innovation applied to understanding systems that took the Dreketh centuries to develop. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. The Galactic Concord's entire approach to pre-contact civilizations was based on careful management, allowing species to develop at their natural pace, making first contact only when they had achieved sufficient technological and social maturity to integrate peacefully into the galactic community. The system had worked for 100,000 years, but it had never accounted for humans.
Admiral Chen Wei stood on the observation deck of the GSS Endeavour, humanity's first purpose-built interstellar vessel, and watched the stars shift around her. The quantum displacement drive, humanity's own innovation, built on principles they derived from the recovered alien probe, but improved in ways that even their best scientists didn't fully understand, folded space with an elegance that still took her breath away.
Admiral, we're approaching the designated emergence point, Commander Sarah Okonkwo reported from her station. All systems nominal. The delegation is prepared. Chen Wei nodded, her reflection ghosting across the transparent aluminum viewport. At 62 years old, she had devoted her entire life to this moment. She had been a young officer when humanity first decoded the alien probe's data archives and realized that they were not alone in the universe. She had commanded the defense platforms when Earth's governments finally set aside their differences and united under the recognition that external threats demanded internal cooperation. She had overseen the construction of the fleet that now followed in Endeavour's wake. 37 vessels, each one a testament to human ingenuity, built in orbital shipyards using techniques that had been theory just decades ago. Crewed by men and women who had trained their entire adult lives for a moment that their grandparents would have considered science fiction.
Funny, isn't it? Chen Wei said softly.
Okonkwo looked up from her console. Ma'am?
They've been watching us. All this time, they've been watching us and waiting for us to be ready. Chen Wei smiled, but there was something fierce in her expression. They thought they'd get to decide when we joined their community. They thought they'd get to control the terms.
Admiral, are you certain about this approach? The diplomatic corps suggested that a more measured introduction might. The diplomatic corps can suggest whatever they like. They weren't there when we decoded the probe's historical archives. They didn't see what happened to the Venthari, the Cossack, the 7 other species that were introduced to the galactic community before they were ready. Chen Wei's hands tightened on the railing before her. Assimilated, controlled, or eliminated, those were their options. Their cultures erased, their independence stripped away, their destinies decided by species who thought they knew better. Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. And you believe we're ready to stand against that? Chen Wei turned to face her executive officer. We've had 70 years to prepare, Commander. 70 years to study their technology and improve upon it. 70 years to unite our species, to build our fleet, to train our people. 70 years to understand exactly what we would be facing and to prepare accordingly. She gestured toward the viewport, where the distorted starlight was beginning to stabilize as they approached normal space. Out there, they have a Concorde that has stood for 100,000 years. They have thousands of species, countless worlds, technology so advanced that it took our best minds decades just to understand the basic principles. They have every advantage that age and experience can provide. But we have something they've never encountered, Chen Wei continued. We have a species that knew what was coming and prepared for it. We have humanity, united, armed, and absolutely unwilling to become another footnote in someone else's history. The stars snapped back into focus as the Endeavour emerged from quantum displacement. Around them, one by one, the rest of the human fleet materialized into real space, a constellation of vessels ranging from nimble destroyers to massive carrier platforms, all of them gleaming with the newness of a species that had built its entire interstellar capability in less than a century. Before them hung the Concordant Station, the administrative heart of galactic civilization. It was a structure of impossible scale, a sphere of living metal and crystalline energy fields that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Around it orbited hundreds of vessels from dozens of species, their designs as varied as the stars themselves.
Open a channel, Chenwei ordered. All frequencies, all formats. Let's introduce ourselves.
Ambassador Veth Karan was in the middle of a heated debate with the Kethmori delegation when the alerts began sounding throughout Concordant Station. Multiple emergence signatures, an automated system announced. Unknown configuration. Origin point, Sol system. Species identification, human.
The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from 100 species surged toward their consuls, their translators working overtime to process the overlapping demands, questions, and exclamations. Veth Karan pushed through the crowd toward the central observation platform, his skin flickering through colors so rapidly that he appeared almost white.
"This is impossible," Thrixol was saying. "They can't have developed FTL capability. Our latest observations were only—" "Your observations were years out of date," Veth Karan replied, "and clearly inadequate." He reached the observation platform just as the visual feeds activated, and what he saw stopped him cold.
The human fleet hung in space with a precision that spoke of extensive training and careful coordination. 37 vessels, each one radiating energy signatures that didn't match any known configuration in the Concord's databases. They weren't simply modified Dreketh technology. They were something new, something that incorporated alien principles with innovations that the Concord's best minds couldn't immediately identify.
And at the center of the formation, the largest vessel broadcast a message on every frequency, in every language format, with a clarity that suggested the humans understood concordant communication protocols far better than they should have. "This is Admiral Chen Wei of the United Earth Federation vessel Endeavor, representing the people of Earth. We come in peace, but we do not come seeking permission. We know you have been watching us. We know you have protocols for species like ours, protocols that assume we need your guidance, your control, your protection from the complexities of galactic civilization." The message paused, and when it resumed, there was steel in the voice that transcended translation.
We reject those protocols. We reject the assumption that you have the right to determine our readiness, our development, or our destiny. We have studied your history, your culture, and your laws. We understand the Concord and its purpose, and we are prepared to be part of this community, but as equals, not as subjects.
High Monitor Orenthal stepped forward, his massive form casting shadows across the observation platform. "They're threatening us. 37 ships against the combined might of the Galactic Concord. It's suicide." Veth Karan wasn't so sure. He watched the human vessels on the display, noting how they held their formation with unwavering discipline, how their energy signatures remained stable despite the proximity of vastly larger concordant vessels. These were not the ships of a desperate species gambling on intimidation. These were the ships of a species that had come prepared. "Get me a detailed analysis of their weapon systems," Veth Karan ordered, "and their shields. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The analysis came back within minutes, and it changed everything. "They've developed adaptive shielding," the technical officer reported, his voice trembling slightly. "Based on Dreketh principles, but they've improved it significantly. Our preliminary calculations suggest that their vessels could withstand sustained fire from multiple concordant warships." "And their weapons?" "Unknown configuration, but the energy readings are—" The officer paused, checking his data twice. "They're higher than anything we've seen from a species at their developmental stage, by a factor of 10. Orenthal made a sound that might have been disbelief in his species. 70 years. They had 70 years and a single probe, and they developed weapons that exceed our standard capabilities? The humans are efficient, Veth Karan observed, and determined. And they appear to have a talent for innovation that our projections failed to account for. We should attack now, Thrixol insisted, before they can establish a foothold. If we allow them to negotiate from a position of strength. We would be validating every fear they have about us, Veth interrupted. Their message made their concerns clear. They believe we control and absorb pre-contact species rather than helping them. If we attack unprovoked, we prove them right.
They're not pre-contact anymore, Orenthal rumbled. They're here, uninvited, in force. That changes the equation.
The debate might have continued indefinitely, but it was interrupted by another transmission from the human fleet. This time, the message was more specific.
We request a formal audience with the Galactic Concord's governing body. We are prepared to present our case for full and immediate membership, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. We are also prepared to discuss mutual defense agreements, trade relationships, and cultural exchange programs. But we will not be treated as children seeking the approval of their elders. We will not accept guidance that is designed to limit our development or ensure our dependence. We are humanity.
We speak for Earth, and we are here to stay. Part 2. The Presentation.
The Grand Assembly Hall of Concordance Station could seat representatives from over 1,000 species, and today it was nearly full. Word of humanity's arrival had spread through the galactic communication networks with unprecedented speed, and beings from across the Concorde had come to witness the event, some out of curiosity, others out of concern, and more than a few out of naked hostility.
Admiral Chen Wei walked into the hall with her delegation flanking her, and she did not look up at the towering seats that surrounded her. She had seen the recordings of other species making their first appearance before the Concorde, the way they stumbled, overwhelmed by the scale and diversity of the assembly, the way they fell into patterns of deference and submission that had been carefully engineered by the hall's very architecture.
She would not stumble. She would not submit. Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth, the automated announcer intoned, its translation matrix working to render her title in hundreds of languages simultaneously. Representing the United Earth Federation, seeking audience with the Galactic Concorde regarding the matter of species introduction. Species introduction, Chen Wei repeated, her voice amplified by the floating translation drones that surrounded her. An interesting phrase. It implies that we are being introduced to you, rather than the other way around. It implies that this is your decision, your process, your determination to make. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Representatives shifted in their seats, their various physiologies expressing surprise, offense, or interest in countless different ways. I am here to correct that implication, Chen Wei continued. We are not a species seeking introduction. We are not applicants hoping for acceptance. We are the representatives of a civilization that has been watching you, just as you have been watching us, and we have come with a proposal. High Monitor Orenthal rose from his position among the Vrexian delegation. You speak with considerable arrogance for a species that achieved interstellar capability mere decades ago. The Concorde has existed for 100,000 years. We have seen species like yours before, young, ambitious, convinced of their own importance. Most of them learned humility. Some did not survive the lesson. I am familiar with those species, Chen Wei replied. I have read their histories in the archives we recovered from the Dreketh probe. The Venthari, who were introduced to the Concorde 4,000 years ago, they were given guidance that ensured their technology remained dependent on concordant systems. Their civilization still exists, but it has never developed an original innovation in the millennia since their introduction. They are a client species, not a member. She turned slowly, addressing the full assembly. The Cossack, who were deemed not ready and placed under protective observation until they could demonstrate sufficient maturity. The observation lasted 6 centuries. By the time they were finally permitted to develop independently, their culture had been so thoroughly studied and documented that they had no secrets, no mysteries, no advantages in any negotiation. They are members of the Concorde now, but they vote as they are told to vote, trade on terms that others set, and have never once held a position of real authority. You oversimplify complex historical situations, Thrixel clicked from the Kethmori section. Those species were guided toward outcomes that benefited the entire galactic community. Sometimes individual civilizations must sacrifice some autonomy for the greater good. The greater good, Chen Wei echoed. An interesting concept when defined by those who already hold power. But I'm not here to relitigate history. I'm here to present an alternative. She raised her hand, and the holographic projectors that her team had installed, much to the consternation of the station's security forces, activated. The image that appeared above her was simple, a blue-green planet hanging in the darkness of space. "This is Earth," she said, "our home. For more than 300,000 years, our species has lived on this world. For most of that time, we were what you would consider primitives, struggling for survival, fighting among ourselves, slowly building the knowledge that would eventually carry us to the stars." The image shifted, showing humanity's progression through time. Cave paintings gave way to ancient cities, which gave way to industrial landscapes, which gave way to the gleaming structures of modern Earth. 73 years ago, we recovered an object that changed everything. A probe from a species called the Dreketh, which had drifted into our solar system and been damaged by gravitational forces. We studied it in secret, at first uncertain of what we had found. But as we began to understand its contents, we realized the truth. The image changed again, showing surveillance feeds that the humans had somehow obtained. Feeds from concordant observation posts, showing the same assembly hall, the same monitoring stations, the same careful documentation of Earth's development. "You were watching us," Chen Wei said. "You had been watching us for centuries, and you had already decided our fate. We were classified as a pre-contact civilization, to be observed until we reached a predetermined level of development. Then we would be introduced, brought into your community on your terms, guided toward outcomes that served your interests, and slowly integrated into a system that would ensure we never became a threat to the established order." The silence in the assembly hall was absolute. "We found your plans in the probe's archives," Chen Wei continued. "The protocols for species introduction, the methods for ensuring smooth integration, the techniques for identifying and neutralizing any elements of a new species that might prove disruptive." She let the word hang in the air. "We decided that we would not be smoothly integrated. We decided that we would be disruptive." She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show Earth's transformation over the past 7 decades. The unification of human governments, the construction of orbital infrastructure, the development of technologies that built on concordant principles but diverged in unexpected directions, the creation of a military capable of defending human interests against any threat. "For 70 years we prepared. We knew you were watching, so we hid our most sensitive developments in places your sensors couldn't reach. We built our fleet in deep space facilities, tested our weapons in systems you had never catalogued, trained our people in scenarios you never imagined. We made ourselves ready, not for introduction, but for contact as equals." High Monitor Orenthal leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. "You've made an impressive presentation, Admiral, but words and images prove nothing. What evidence do you offer that your species is truly ready for the responsibilities of galactic membership?" "I offer you this," Chen Wei said. "In exactly 12 hours, a fleet of human vessels will arrive at the Threxian border colony of Vortax Prime. They will engage and destroy the Ravager swarm that has been approaching that system for the past 3 weeks. The swarm that Concordant Intelligence has been tracking, but has chosen not to warn the Threxian population about." The assembly erupted. The Threxian delegation, a collection of slender beings with iridescent wings, surged to their feet in a chorus of outraged buzzing. Representatives from other species demanded explanations, clarifications, or denials. "You claim to have better intelligence than the Concord's own networks?" Thrixel demanded, her mandibles clicking with barely contained fury. "I claim nothing," Chen Wei replied. In 12 hours, you will be able to verify the truth of my statement. The Ravager swarm will arrive at Vortex Prime. My ships will destroy it, and the people of that colony will live, thanks to human intervention. Intervention that the Concorde was unwilling or unable to provide.
She took a step forward, her gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives. I also know about the Kethmori trade dispute with the Lycan Confederation, the one that your diplomats have been secretly mediating in a way that favors Kethmori interests despite their clear violation of established trade law. I know about the Vrexian scientific expedition that is currently mining rare minerals from an uninhabited world that falls within Silithian territorial claims.
I know about 17 other situations in which the Concorde's public positions differ significantly from its private actions.
The silence returned, heavier than before.
We have not been idle during our preparation, Chen Wei said. We have been listening, learning, and understanding exactly how this community functions beneath its surface of laws and protocols. We know your secrets. We know your weaknesses. And we know that the Concorde is not the benevolent organization it presents itself to be.
This is outrageous, Orenthal rumbled. You accuse us of deception while admitting to espionage against sovereign species? I admit to nothing except preparedness, Chen Wei replied. You had 300 years to decide how you wanted to interact with humanity. You chose observation, manipulation, and eventual control. We simply made a different choice. We chose to be ready.
She clasped her hands behind her back, her posture shifting from confrontational to merely confident. But I did not come here to threaten or to accuse. I came here to propose. Humanity is prepared to offer full partnership with the Galactic Concorde. We bring technologies that your species have not developed, perspectives that your cultures have not considered, and capabilities that could benefit the entire galactic community.
We ask only to be treated as equals, full members with full rights, subject to the same laws, and entitled to the same protections as any other species.
And if we refuse? Thrixall asked.
Chen Wei smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we will continue to operate independently. We will pursue our own interests, establish our own alliances, and develop our own relationships with species who are willing to treat us fairly. We would prefer to be part of this community, but we are not dependent upon it. We are humanity. We have survived everything our own world could throw at us. We will survive whatever the galaxy presents as well.
Part 3. The Demonstration.
12 hours later, the assembly reconvened to watch the feeds from Vortex Prime. The Ravager swarm was exactly where Chen Wei had said it would be, a massive concentration of biomechanical organisms that had been drifting through space for millennia, consuming resources and destroying any civilization unfortunate enough to be in their path. Concordant analysts had tracked the swarm's trajectory and determined that it would reach the Threxian colony in approximately 14 days, giving them ample time to evacuate. What they had not done was warn the Threxians.
The swarm's approach vector was classified as confidential, Orenthal explained, his voice carefully neutral. We did not wish to cause unnecessary panic before evacuation procedures could be properly organized.
Unnecessary panic, Chen Wei repeated, among a population of 11 million beings who might have appreciated the opportunity to prepare for their own survival.
Orenthal did not respond.
On the display, the human fleet emerged from quantum displacement at the edge of the vortex system. 12 vessels, a fraction of the force that had arrived at Concordant Station, arranged in a formation that Concordant tacticians did not recognize. They moved with a precision that spoke of countless hours of drilling, each ship anticipating the movements of its companions without any observable communication delay.
The Ravager swarm detected the new arrivals almost immediately. The organisms shifted their trajectory, recognizing the ships as potential prey. They had consumed civilizations before, and they had no reason to believe these newcomers would be any different.
They were wrong.
The human vessels opened fire with weapons that registered on concordance sensors as impossible. Energy beams that cut through Ravager biological armor as if it didn't exist.
Projectiles that tracked individual organisms and detonated with precisely calculated force. Defensive screens that absorbed the Ravagers' acidic countermeasures and redirected them back toward their sources.
The battle lasted 18 minutes.
When it was over, the Ravager swarm, a concentration of organisms that had destroyed 17 civilizations across 15,000 years, had been reduced to drifting debris. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. They had not even taken significant damage.
That's not possible, a Kethmori tactical analyst murmured, reviewing the data feeds. Our projections indicated that a swarm of that size would require at least 200 concordant vessels to defeat, with expected losses of 40% or higher. They did it with 12 ships and no casualties.
How? Thrixel demanded, her compound eyes fixed on Chen Wei. How have you developed weapons that exceed our capabilities so significantly? Chen Wei considered the question for a moment before answering. When we recovered the Dreketh probe, we found technology that had been designed 4,000 years ago. It was impressive by our standards, but we recognized almost immediately that it had fundamental limitations that the Dreketh had apparently never considered worth addressing.
She gestured toward the display, which now showed technical schematics that made several concordant scientists gasp in recognition.
Your species developed technology incrementally, Chen Wei continued. You build on what came before, improving gradually, following established principles that have proven reliable over millennia. It's a stable approach. It produces consistent results. But it also creates blind spots, assumptions that are never questioned because they've always been true.
Humans don't work that way. Our history is filled with moments where everything changed, where new ideas emerged that fundamentally transformed how we understood our world. We've learned to expect disruption, to embrace it, to seek it out. When we encountered your technology, we didn't just study it, we questioned it. We asked why it worked the way it did and whether it could work differently.
And you found improvements that eluded us for millennia? Orenthal sounded skeptical. We found different approaches. Your shield technology, for example, is based on energy absorption and dispersal. Very efficient, very reliable. But we noticed that it fails catastrophically when the energy input exceeds certain thresholds. So we developed shields that work on a different principle, foised harmonics, that actually become stronger when they absorb more energy. The more you hit them, the more difficult they become to penetrate. The technical display shifted to show a comparison between concordant and human shield configurations. Several scientists in the audience made sounds of sudden understanding. Your weapons systems are designed for precision and efficiency, Chen Wei continued. They deliver exactly the energy needed to disable a target, no more. Very civilized, very economical. But against threats like the Ravagers, precision and economy are less important than raw destructive capability. So we developed weapons that prioritize power over refinement. They're not elegant, but they get the job done. You're describing a philosophy of brute force, Thrixel observed.
I'm describing a philosophy of effectiveness, Chen Wei corrected. We don't build weapons to impress other species. We build them to protect our own. And we've learned from a long and bloody history that the best defense is one that makes any attack unthinkably costly.
She let that sink in for a moment before continuing. But weapons are only part of what we're offering. We've also developed manufacturing techniques that could benefit the entire Concord. Medical technologies that address conditions your science has labeled incurable. Theoretical frameworks that could open new avenues of research in fields ranging from energy production to artificial intelligence.
And what do you want in return? Orenthal asked.
What we said from the beginning: equality, respect, the right to determine our own future without interference. We're not asking for favors or concessions. We're simply asking to be treated as partners, rather than subjects. The assembly was silent for a long moment. Representatives exchanged glances, communicated through private channels, and considered the implications of what they had witnessed. Finally, Veth Karan rose from his seat. The Silithian ambassador had been quiet throughout the proceedings, observing more than participating. Now his skin shifted to a calm green that indicated thoughtful consideration. "I would like to propose a motion," he said, "that we adjourn this assembly for a period of 3 days to allow proper consultation among member species. The questions raised by the human delegation require careful consideration, and I believe we owe them, and ourselves, the time to think through the implications fully." "Seconded," Orenthal rumbled, surprising many in the assembly. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities that merit serious evaluation. We should not make decisions of this magnitude in haste." Chen Wei nodded. "We accept. 3 days should provide ample time for your deliberations. In the meantime, we request permission to establish a temporary diplomatic facility in orbit around the station. Our personnel will remain aboard our vessels unless invited elsewhere, and we will make ourselves available for any questions or consultations the Assembly might require." The motion passed with a majority that surprised even its proponents. The Assembly began to disperse, and Chen Wei watched them go with an expression that gave nothing away.
Commander Okonkwo moved to her side as the chamber emptied. "You think they'll agree?"
"I think they don't have a choice," Chen Wei replied. "We've shown them that we can't be ignored, can't be controlled, and can't be defeated by conventional means. The only remaining question is whether they'll accept us as partners or try to find some way to neutralize us despite our preparations."
"And if they choose the latter?" Chen Wei smiled grimly. "Then they'll learn exactly how prepared we really are." Part 4. The Conspiracies. The 3 days that followed were among the most consequential in galactic history, though most of what happened occurred far from public view. In the private chambers of the Kethmori delegation, Thrixel convened an emergency meeting with representatives from 6 other species who shared her concerns about humanity's sudden emergence. The meeting room was shielded against all known forms of surveillance, though the participants were unaware that human listening devices operated on principles that hadn't occurred to concordant engineers. "They're a threat to everything we've built," Thrixel insisted, her mandibles clicking with agitation. "A species that can defeat a Ravager swarm with 12 ships? That can develop weapons exceeding our capabilities in mere decades? They're not just asking for membership. They're positioning themselves to dominate the Concord within a generation." "You're exaggerating," replied Vorathnal, the crystalline ambassador from the Pyrithian collective. "They're impressive, certainly, but they're still a single species with limited resources and no allies." "No allies yet," Thrixel corrected. "But how long before they start recruiting? You saw how they exposed our intelligence operations. They understand how the Concord works. They'll identify which species are dissatisfied, which have grievances, which might benefit from a change in the existing order. They'll offer partnerships, share technology, build a coalition that could challenge the established powers." The Vrexian representative, a younger member of Orenthal's species, who had not attended the main assembly, leaned forward. "What do you propose?" "Containment. Before they can expand their influence, we need to establish limits on their activities, quarantine zones around their territory, restrictions on technology transfer, requirements for concordant oversight of their military operations." Frixall's compound eyes gleamed. "And if they refuse to accept those limitations?" "Then we have grounds for military action," the Vrexian finished. "They've already demonstrated hostile intent by building weapons specifically designed to exceed our capabilities," Thrixel argued. "They've admitted to conducting espionage against sovereign species. They've threatened to operate independently if we don't meet their demands. Any of those would be sufficient justification under existing concordant security protocols." The discussion continued for hours, plans taking shape in the shadows, while the formal diplomatic process ground forward in public. By the end, 6 species had agreed to a coordinated strategy, proposed conditions for human membership that would be impossible for them to accept, then use their refusal as justification for more aggressive action. They were unaware that their entire conversation had been recorded and transmitted to the Endeavor in real time. At the same time, a different meeting was taking place in Ambassador Veth Karan's quarters. The Silithian had invited Chen Wei to a private discussion, something that technically violated protocol, but that both parties considered worth the risk.
I'm going to be direct with you, Vethkaran said, his skin shifting to the purple of concern. There are factions within the Concord that will never accept humanity as equals. They see you as a threat to their power, their influence, their comfortable position at the top of the galactic hierarchy. No matter what you offer, no matter how much you contribute, they will work to undermine, contain, or destroy you.
I know, Chen Wei replied. We've been listening to their conversations.
Vethkaran's skin flickered with surprise. You've penetrated concordant security that comprehensively?
We had 70 years to prepare. We didn't waste them. Chen Wei leaned forward. I also know that not everyone in the Concord shares those views. Some species joined because they believed in the ideals the organization claims to represent: cooperation, mutual benefit, the advancement of all civilizations. Those species have watched the Concord become increasingly dominated by powers that care only about maintaining their own position.
You're suggesting an alliance, Vethkaran said slowly.
I'm suggesting a choice. The Concord can continue as it has been, a club controlled by ancient species who fear change and resist progress. Or it can become what it was supposed to be, a genuine community of equals, working together for the benefit of all. Humanity can help make that happen, but we can't do it alone.
Vethkaran was silent for a long moment. The Silithians were an old species themselves, though not as old as the Vrexians. They had watched the Concord's ideals erode over millennia, had seen the organization's founding principles slowly corrupted by the realities of power politics. Many of them, Vethkaran included, had grown cynical about the possibility of meaningful reform. But the humans had done something that no other species had managed in 100,000 years. They had arrived on their own terms, with the power to back up their demands and the knowledge to understand the game that was being played. They weren't asking for change. They were demonstrating that change was possible.
What would you need from us? Vethkaran asked.
Information, to start. We have good intelligence, but there are still gaps in our understanding. We need to know which species might be receptive to our approach and which are too deeply committed to the existing order to be persuaded. Chen Wei paused. And we need to know the full extent of the plans being made against us. We've intercepted some communications, but we suspect there are deeper conspiracies that haven't been discussed in forums we can monitor.
There are, Vethkaran confirmed. The Concord has contingencies for dealing with species deemed too dangerous for integration, biological agents that can be tailored to specific physiologies, technologies that can destabilize planetary cores, methods for erasing entire civilizations from existence while leaving no evidence of deliberate action.
We suspected as much. Chen Wei's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. And you're willing to share this information with us? I'm willing to ensure that those contingencies are never used against your people, Vethkaran said carefully. I believe the Concord needs reform, but I'm not yet ready to commit to revolutionary action. Give me time to build support among the species who share my concerns. When the moment comes, we'll be ready to stand with you.
Chen Wei nodded. That's all we can ask. Thank you, Ambassador. I hope this is the beginning of a productive relationship.
As do I. Vethkaran's skin shifted to a cautious orange. But be careful, Admiral. The forces arrayed against you are ancient and patient. They have survived challenges before by waiting for their opponents to make mistakes. Don't give them that opportunity.
We don't intend to. Part 5. The Vote. The 3 days passed, and the assembly reconvened for what everyone understood would be a defining moment in galactic history. The chamber was more crowded than it had been for the initial presentation, with representatives from species who hadn't bothered to attend the first session now jostling for position. High Monitor Orenthal called the session to order with the traditional ceremonial phrases, but his voice carried an edge that hadn't been present before.
The Vrexian had spent the past 3 days reviewing intelligence reports and consulting with his advisors, and the conclusions they had reached were deeply troubling.
"We have considered the human delegation's proposal," he announced. "The Concord recognizes that Earth has demonstrated impressive capabilities and expresses willingness to explore formal relationships. However, before full membership can be considered, the Council of Elders has determined that certain conditions must be met."
Chen Wei stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by her delegation, her expression betraying nothing.
First, Orenthal continued, humanity must agree to a technology sharing arrangement in which all military innovations are submitted to a concordant review board before deployment. This ensures that new capabilities are integrated into the galactic defense infrastructure rather than remaining under unilateral control. Second, human territorial claims must be subject to adjustment to ensure they do not conflict with the interests of established member species. Several pending claims by senior Concord members encompass regions that humanity has identified as strategically important.
Third, the human fleet must submit to concordant operational command during any joint military operations, ensuring coordination and preventing misunderstandings that could escalate into conflict.
Fourth, humanity must accept a supervised integration period of no less than 500 years, during which human development will be guided by a concordant oversight committee to ensure smooth transition into full membership.
The conditions continued, each one more restrictive than the last. By the time Orenthal finished, the pattern was clear to everyone in the chamber. The Concord wasn't offering partnership, it was demanding surrender.
Chen Wei waited until the list was complete, then stepped forward to address the assembly.
"I want to thank the High Monitor for his thorough presentation," she said, her voice calm. "The conditions he's outlined make the Concord's position very clear. You see humanity as a threat to be controlled, not a partner to be welcomed." "We see humanity as a young species that requires guidance," Orenthal countered. "These conditions are no different from those imposed on any new member during their integration period." "Except that they are," Chen Wei replied. "I've reviewed the integration conditions offered to every species that has joined the Concord in the past 50,000 years. The most restrictive period imposed was 200 years, on a species that had initiated armed conflict with 3 existing members before seeking membership. You're proposing 500 years for a species that has done nothing but defend itself and offer cooperation." She turned to address the full assembly. "The technology sharing requirement would give the Concord effective veto power over our defense capabilities. The territorial adjustments would reduce human-controlled space by more than 40%, including the systems where our primary manufacturing facilities are located. The operational command provision would allow concordant officers to order human ships into combat situations of the Concord's choosing, regardless of Earth's interests or the safety of our people. These are not conditions for membership. They are terms of surrender, and we reject them." The chamber erupted into noise, some species expressing outrage at the human defiance, others murmuring agreement with Chen Wei's assessment. Orenthal raised his massive arms for silence. "If you reject the conditions, you reject membership. The Concord cannot accept a species that refuses to submit to the rules that govern our community." "Then we will not submit," Chen Wei said. "But neither will we leave. We came here to offer partnership, and partnership remains on the table for any species willing to accept it. But we will not diminish ourselves to satisfy the fears of those who see us only as a threat." "This is your final position?" Thrixall demanded.
"It is."
"Then you leave us no choice." Thrixall rose from her position, her wings spreading in a display of authority. The Keth-Mori Collective formally charges the United Earth Federation with hostile actions against the Galactic Concord. The evidence includes development of weapons specifically designed to exceed concordant capabilities, espionage against sovereign member species, and refusal to accept reasonable conditions for peaceful integration.
Under Article 17 of the Concordant Charter, we demand immediate military action to neutralize this threat.
The demand hung in the air like a physical weight. Around the chamber, representatives shifted uneasily. Article 17 had been invoked only twice in the Concorde's history, and both times had resulted in the complete destruction of the target species.
Chen Wei remained calm. Before the Assembly votes on this motion, I believe the chamber should be aware of certain relevant information.
What information? Orenthal asked.
The conversations that took place in the Kethmori delegation's shielded chambers over the past 3 days, the plans that were made, the species that participated. Chen Wei gestured, and the holographic projectors activated, displaying recordings that made the conspirators turn pale, or whatever passed for pale among their various physiologies.
The recordings played for the Assembly, conversations in which Thrixel and her allies discussed strategies for containing humanity, references to contingency measures that could eliminate the human threat entirely, explicit admissions that the proposed conditions were designed to be unacceptable so that military action could be justified.
When the recordings ended, the chamber was silent.
You violated the sovereign security of a member species, Thrixel hissed.
You conspired to destroy my people, Chen Wei replied. I consider that a greater violation. But I'm not here to trade accusations. I'm here to demonstrate what humanity truly offers. Not just our technology or our military capabilities, but our perspective.
She stepped to the center of the chamber, and the holographic display shifted to show a different kind of image. Not weapons or ships, but faces. Humans and aliens working together, building structures, sharing meals, exchanging knowledge.
For the past 70 years, while we were preparing for this moment, we were also reaching out. Quietly, carefully, we made contact with species that the Concorde had classified as too insignificant for membership. The Valif, who inhabit a single world on the galactic rim and have been refused trading rights for 3,000 years. The Quinex, whose homeworld was devastated by a Ravager swarm that the Concorde declined to intercept.
The Morthani, whose cultural practices were deemed incompatible with concordant values and who have been isolated ever since. The images showed human vessels delivering supplies to struggling colonies, human engineers helping to rebuild infrastructure, human diplomats engaging with species that the Concorde had written off as irrelevant.
We offered them what we're offering you: partnership without conditions, cooperation without control. And they accepted. As of today, humanity has formal alliance agreements with 47 species that the Concorde considers beneath notice. Small species, weak species, species that have no voice in this assembly. But they have a voice now. They have us.
Ambassador Vethkaran rose, his skin a bright green of hope. I call for a vote of confidence in the current concordant leadership. Their handling of humanity's emergence has been characterized by deception, conspiracy, and attempted aggression against a species that offered nothing but cooperation. This is not the Concorde I joined. This is not the Concorde that most of our species believe in. It is time for change. The motion was seconded by representatives from a dozen species, and then a dozen more. The vote proceeded, and when it was complete, the results shocked even the most optimistic observers. The motion passed. The existing concordant leadership was dissolved, pending new elections and a comprehensive review of integration policies, military protocols, and the treatment of species outside the formal membership structure.
In the chaos that followed, Chen Wei found herself surrounded by representatives who wanted to know more about humanity's alliance network, who wanted to discuss trade possibilities, who wanted to understand how a single species had so completely upended a system that had seemed eternal just days ago. She answered their questions patiently, but her eyes kept returning to the portion of the chamber where the conspirators sat in stunned silence. Thrixel, Orenthal, and their allies had gambled that humanity could be controlled or destroyed like every challenging species before them. They had lost.
Part 6. The New Order. 6 months later, the Galactic Concord looked very different from the organization that had greeted humanity's arrival. The reforms had been extensive, and by galactic standards, remarkably rapid. The integration protocols had been completely rewritten, replacing the paternalistic approach of the old system with a framework based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation. Species that had been denied membership for cultural or technological reasons were invited to apply under the new criteria, and many did, some with human sponsorship, others simply taking advantage of the changed environment. The military command structure had been reorganized as well. Human tactical innovations had proven so effective against the Ravagers that other species had requested training in their methods, leading to the establishment of joint exercises and shared operational doctrines. The human fleet remained under Earth's ultimate command, but cooperative relationships with allied species had created an informal defense network that rivaled the Concord's formal military in capability. Perhaps most significantly, the old power blocks that had dominated Concordan politics for millennia had begun to fragment. The exposure of the conspiracies against humanity had damaged the credibility of the species involved, and many of their traditional allies had quietly distanced themselves. New coalitions were forming, often centered on the principles that humanity had championed: equality, transparency, and genuine cooperation. Admiral Chen Wei observed all of this from the bridge of the Endeavour, which had remained in orbit around Concordant Station as humanity's primary diplomatic facility. She was preparing for a meeting with the newly elected Concordant Council when Commander Okonkwo approached with a datapad. "The final integration agreement," Okonkwo said. "They've accepted all of our conditions, full membership with complete rights and no oversight period. It's unprecedented." Chen Wei reviewed the document, noting the signatures from representatives of hundreds of species. "It's what we asked for from the beginning. It just took them a while to realize they couldn't get anything else." "There's something else," Okonkwo hesitated. "Intelligence reports from the Rim territories, the species that refuse to participate in the reforms, the core of the old guard, they're gathering. There are indications that they might be planning some kind of response." "Let them plan." Chen Wei set down the datapad. "We've shown what we can do when we're caught off guard and preparing in secret. Imagine what we can accomplish when we see them coming and have the resources of the reformed Concord behind us." "You're not concerned?" "I'm always concerned. That's what kept us alive during the preparation years. But I'm also confident." Chen Wei gestured toward the viewport, where the station hung in space, surrounded by vessels from dozens of species, many of them displaying the markers of humanity's alliance network. "We came here alone, Commander. Now look at us. We have partners, allies, and friends among species that had never heard of Earth 6 months ago. That's power that no conspiracy can match." Okonkwo nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? Coming here in force, demanding equality at gunpoint? Some of the diplomatic corps think we could have achieved the same results through patient negotiation." "Patient negotiation got the Venthari turned into permanent clients," Chen Wei replied. "It got the Cossacks studied for 6 centuries until they had nothing left to offer. We studied the Concord's history, and we learned from it. The only species that kept their independence were the ones who came in too strong to be controlled. We weren't going to be another cautionary tale." She turned to face Okonkwo directly. "But I take your point. Power is a tool, and tools can be misused. That's why we're building alliances rather than empires. That's why we're sharing our technology rather than hoarding it. We didn't come here to become the new masters of the galaxy. We came here to create a galaxy where there are no masters and no subjects, just species working together for mutual benefit." "Is that really possible?" Chen Wei smiled. "Ask me in 100 years. For now, I'll settle for making the attempt." Epilogue: The Legacy. 1,000 years after humanity's dramatic arrival at Concordant Station, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The old Concordant Order had given way to something new, a loose federation of species and coalitions that cooperated without domination and competed without destruction. The integration protocols that humanity had championed had become the standard approach for welcoming new civilizations, and thousands of species that would have been overlooked or controlled under the old system had become valued members of the galactic community. Human influence was everywhere, though not in the ways that the conspirators had feared. Human ideas had spread. The emphasis on adaptability, the willingness to question assumptions, the insistence on treating every sapient being as worthy of respect. Human technology had been shared and improved upon, creating new possibilities that even the concordant scientists of a millennium ago would have considered miraculous. And humans themselves had changed. Contact with thousands of alien civilizations had broadened humanity's perspective, introduced new ways of thinking, and challenged assumptions that had seemed fundamental. The species that emerged from 1,000 years of galactic interaction was very different from the one that had arrived at Concordant Station in force, wiser, perhaps, and certainly more humble about its place in the cosmic order.
But some things remained constant.
On Earth, now the center of a civilization that spanned hundreds of worlds, Admiral Chen Wei was remembered as the woman who had made first contact on humanity's terms. Her statue stood in the plaza outside the United Earth Federation's governmental complex, her expression exactly as it had been that day in the assembly hall, calm, confident, and absolutely unwilling to accept a diminished place for her people.
The inscription at the base of the statue read, simply, "They thought we weren't ready. We arrived overprepared." It was, historians agreed, the perfect summary of humanity's approach to the galaxy. Other species had waited to be discovered, had accepted the roles assigned to them by more powerful civilizations, had integrated slowly and carefully into the existing order. Humans had done none of those things. They had taken control of their own destiny, had refused to accept limitations imposed by others, and had transformed a system that seemed immutable through sheer determination and preparation. Whether this made them admirable or terrifying depended largely on perspective. The species that had benefited from humanity's reforms celebrated them as liberators who had broken the chains of an oppressive order. The species that had lost power cursed them as arrogant upstarts who had disrupted a stable system that had served the galaxy well for millennia.
But both groups agreed on one thing. Nothing had been the same since the day the human fleet emerged from quantum displacement in orbit around Concordant Station. The galaxy had been put on notice that a new species had arrived, and that species had no intention of being overlooked, underestimated, or controlled.
They had thought humans weren't ready. Humanity had arrived overprepared. And the galaxy had never been the same.
Final reflection.
The story of humanity's entry into the galactic community became one of the most studied events in the new historical curriculum that emerged from the concordant reforms. Scholars analyzed every aspect of the encounter, the decades of secret preparation, the tactical brilliance of Chen Wei's presentation, the way human alliances had undermined the conspiracies against them before they could take effect. But the deepest insights came not from the events themselves, but from what they revealed about the nature of civilization and power. The old Concord had been built on the assumption that established species knew best, that younger civilizations needed guidance and control for their own good. This assumption had seemed self-evident for 100,000 years. It was challenged and destroyed by a species that had been considered too young, too primitive, and too dangerous to be trusted with the truth about the galaxy. Humanity had proven that readiness was not determined by age or experience, but by determination and preparation. They had shown that the assumptions underlying the old system were not universal truths, but choices that could be questioned, challenged, and replaced. In doing so, they had given hope to every species that had ever been told they weren't ready, that they needed to wait, that their destiny was in someone else's hands. The message of humanity's arrival echoed across the galaxy and down through the centuries. Your fate is your own to determine. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It was, in the end, a very human message, and it was the most important thing humanity contributed to the galactic community.
Not their weapons or their technology or their tactical innovations, but their absolute insistence that every sapient being had the right to determine their own path.
The universe was vast and old and full of wonders beyond counting. Humanity had added one more wonder to that collection, the idea that even the smallest, youngest, most overlooked civilization could change everything if it was willing to prepare, to persevere, and to refuse to accept anything less than equality.
They had thought humans weren't ready. They had been wrong. And the galaxy was better for it.
The end.